Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a real privilege to follow the Honourable Gallant Member for Aldershot, a constituency with a fine military tradition, and it was a really illuminating and interesting discussion of this bill. I echo sentiments from all sides of the House in welcoming the principles of this bill, and I think on reflection it is actually part of a longer-term trend that we have seen develop in our armed forces in recent years. I reflect upon joining the Territorial Army at the age of 17 in 2006, when it was the first year of the formation of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, which at the time was a very controversial exercise in the restructuring of the armed forces and the Army in particular. The change to the regimental system was met with much dismay amongst those who held true to the traditions of the regimental golden thread, as it was known. But with a decade of experience of that new multi-battalion regimental system, I think it's been seen broadly as a successful development in the British Army's history, primarily because it has offered increased career flexibility for those serving within those multi-battalion regiments. And I would reflect upon that move to a true One Army structure as being an excellent one, and this feels like a continued evolution on that agenda. I think what we could look at in this bill is more formalised structure between the regular and reserve components and how that might play out. I reflect upon my own friends and colleagues in the Army Reserves, for example, who have transitioned between regular battalions and reservist battalions and vice versa. And whilst they've developed great experience from that, and I include myself in that, attachments to regular battalions and serving alongside them in exercises around Europe, I would also reflect that there's still a stigma attached to reservists transitioning to more long-term service with regular battalions. For example, someone who is commissioned on the reserve commissioning course at Sandhurst can't then have a command role within a regular battalion because it's seen as still not having developed the necessary training and competence to do that. So I would like to see that opportunity explored in more detail through the course of this bill. I think that is an excellent opportunity for greater synergy between our regular and reserve forces, and we should examine that opportunity. I think that one of the key developments in the recent years in the multi-battalion structure for infantry regiments has been the end of the arms plot, which was one of the worst experiences that regular soldiers tended to have, and that the entire battalion would be uprooted lock, stock and barrel every couple of years and moved to a completely different part of the UK, or perhaps to Germany, or even as far afield as Hong Kong and places like that, where the entire family's life and careers of their dependents were uprooted and changed. And that was seen as a very pernicious aspect of serving in the armed forces. And it's great that Labour brought in the reforms to the army structure that ended the arms plot and stabilised the location of army battalions, which I think was great. And I feel that this is, again, a further development in that regard of providing stability to families who rely on that depth of building a relationship with a local community and building that relationship with a unit and the local community, which is very welcome. But I would also like to see greater emphasis on the legal status of those pursuing perhaps civilian opportunities while still serving in a regular unit. I think that's important as well. I know from personal experience that many reservists experience regular discrimination when looking at civilian career opportunities. I remember when I was at university looking at a part-time job, and because I was also a reservist, I wasn't offered that job because I could tell at the interview as soon as I mentioned that they weren't interested in me pursuing that. And I think it's important that we promote, not just from a passive sense, the opportunities of skills and experience of having served in the reserves, but also legally providing protected status for that. And similarly, that should feed into how this bill will consider regulars transitioning into some form of civilian employment as well as serving in a regular capacity. I think that is critical. I was heartened to hear that in the surveys carried out that 32% of regular personnel consider that this will be a positive development and it would encourage them to retain their career development in the armed forces. And I think that is a very encouraging situation, particularly... Yes, I'm happy to give way. Thank you.
Thank you for giving way. On the point of retention, as a member of the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, I've been very impressed by the dedication and skills and bravery of the Armed Forces. But there's no doubt that the pressures of balancing family life with a career in the forces, particularly for those who are moving around frequently or doing long tours of duty, is very high. In welcoming the bill, does the right honourable gentleman agree with me that this will improve the retention not just of the staff who are reservists, but also of those in the regular army?
Thank you, Honourable Lady, for that intervention. I am very sympathetic to the sentiments that you've offered the House on that particular aspect of this bill. And I, reflecting actually this weekend, one of my close friends actually was celebrating an early Christmas with his infant daughter because he's about to deploy on active service in Afghanistan. And that's just an insight to the extraordinary depth of commitment and sacrifice that our armed forces made, unlike any other public servants, I think, and we should really uphold that. And the comments offered tonight on, for example, respecting the covenant in terms of the pay cap and reflecting the remuneration of our armed forces should really enter into that. When we're talking about serving without fear or favour 24 hours a day on exercise or on operations overseas, does the compensation for that severe dislocation from civilian interaction or from a family life really reflect the commitment they are making? I think we ought to consider that as well as a broader consideration. But yes, I think not only the development of family life, but also considering how would this potentially have an impact on progression in a career in the regular forces as well. I know certainly that your consideration for promotion within the reserves, for example, is predicated largely on how often you can commit to attending career courses or attending weekend training events or annual camps. And given the demands on civilian career development as well, that can often prejudice your progression within the reservist forces. And I wonder whether that similar subtle effect might have an impact in the regular army as well when they're considering people for promotion. Would it be seen as something that's a lowest common denominator thing when considering progression in the ranks? I'd also like to think about the issue around cap badges in different arms and services and how this might play out in different branches. We've heard reference, particularly the Honourable Member for Raleigh made a critical point tonight about the severe undermanning, particularly in key pinch point trades and services in the armed forces, which are experiencing severe undermanning. And they're, ironically, some of the areas where we could leverage better skills into the service from civilian life. And I think it'd be interesting to see more scrutiny over how this bill will help promote that adoption of flexible working within different branches and arms and services in the army. I think when you think of, for example, the infantry or the cavalry, which is a very traditional sort of bottom-up development of career progression built on experience and the highly specialised nature of those roles, you might see a better opportunity for civilian infusion of talent and skills and experience through some of the more technical arms and services. I'm thinking for actually the Intelligence Corps through cyber, through the engineering and REME, for example, which might benefit from greater cross-pollination between the private sector or the defence sector and the armed forces itself. And I think that might be an interesting way to explore potential scenarios of how this might impact on certain trades or cap badges and how that might work out. I think when we're looking at the variation of practical application, it would be a really useful exercise to do so. I also would like to say that it's clear that when the army structure was proposed back in 2006, which ended the single battalions and moved it to multi-battalions, we also saw a reduction in the regular battalions of infantry from 40 to 33. And that was a really unfortunate exercise, I feel, because although we were realising more capability from ending the arms plot and the transition of each battalion through a period of changing roles, we've lost a critical mass of capability in our army as a whole. And I'll also say that when we looked at the reforms to the reservists, I remember very vividly actually serving in the territorials when we were actually told to stop training one year because the MOD had ran out of money. We couldn't effectively continue the end of the training year, which was an atrocious exercise, and it really demonstrated the contempt that the reserves were held in for a long period of time. But it's nice to see that that has now changed, and that the Army Reserves, as they're now known, are critical and integrated into our Army capability. But I would like to see greater opportunity explored and how we aren't just using this as a cost-cutting exercise, but we're actually using it to enhance the capability of our armed forces, and particularly our army, given that the staffing and the manning levels have fallen below the target of 82,000 to 80,000. And I feel that if this bill can be that, and it can be a harbinger to a greater enhancement of the armed forces in the future by harnessing the potential of our people, both within civilian and military life, to add to our military capability, that will be a welcome move forward in our army and our armed forces as a whole. I think also of the transition and the stress that many regulars feel moving to civilian life, and perhaps this could also be used as an opportunity to help transition people who are leaving the armed forces on a longer term basis into a civilian career opportunity, without that cliff edge of simply being thrown out or leaving the army in a sort of very sudden fashion after a sort of 20 or more years of institutional service, as it were, and the pressures and stresses that might bring. So I feel if those aspects can be considered in more detail through the course of this bill, it would be a welcome move, and I'm happy to support that progression. Thank you.